Welcome to New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio, fostering the growth of collaboration through shared resources while empowering families to divorce with dignity. This is New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio is brought to you by the Collaborative Divorce Professionals Practice Group, independent interdisciplinary divorce professionals serving Monmouth, Middlesex, and Ocean counties. For more information, visit njcollaborativeprofessionals.com.
Welcome to New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio. We have a great show today. We're going to be talking about the spouse and the house, dealing with real estate during divorce. Our guests today are Donna Ranieri, a mortgage lending officer with over 35 years experience in the banking industry. We also have family law and real estate attorney C. Catherine Janarone and Daniel Green, who is an attorney who also has dedicated his practice to matters of family law and real estate. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, Dustin. It's good to be here.
Hey, Dustin. How are you?
Good. We've been wanting to talk about this real estate topic for a while, so I'm glad we get to address that today. There's certainly no doubt that for most couples, I would say the biggest asset that they share is the marital home. And I'm guessing it's not only that, but I think that a lot of couples attach sentimental value to their house as well. And we know that buying and selling a home is an emotional experience, and in and of itself, but when you combine that with divorce, I can imagine it certainly doesn't make it any easier. So I'm looking forward to learning more about what happens with the marital home when you're going through a divorce.
Okay. Well, as part of our work with a couple as they are divorcing and attempt to settle all their issues, if they own a marital home, we always need to talk about the home and what we're going to do with it. Often the choice is to sell the home at the same time that the divorce is getting finished, and that's a simple option of selling the home and dividing the proceeds in a manner that the parties agree. Sometimes, however, the parties agree that they will take another option, which is to sell the house but at a later date. It may be because they have a child who is very close to graduating high school, and they don't want to have the child move to another school, leave their friends, and so on. So that has some pitfalls in it if they wait to sell the house. And that's one of our topics today, to talk about what those pitfalls are and to give some ideas as to how to work around those pitfalls to minimize exposure and minimize problems. So One of the first things we look at is if we have a mortgage on the house at the time that the parties are divorced and we agree we're going to sell the house later, who's going to pay the mortgage in the interim? There are options. It could be the spouse who lives in the house pays the mortgage. There could be a combination of factors between both parties, especially if the mortgage is high. We recognize that the spouse who lives in the house is getting shelter from staying in the house. So in my experience, maybe Dan would find this the same, is most times the spouse who stays in the house will be responsible to pay the mortgage. The questions arise that what if that spouse is late in making payments on the mortgage that was in place where both parties are on it? What happens then? What are the ramifications? If you could speak to this, Dan, and what are some ways we can deal with that?
Well, typically there's some form of support payment that might be passing from the spouse that is not in the house to the spouse that's in the house, either in the form of...
This sounds like a Dr. Seuss book a little bit.
Well, we thought we'd do this in rhyme, but then we changed our minds.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Dan.
No problem. So spouse one, who would be the supporting spouse, typically would have to give some money in some fashion to spouse two, who would be the one living in the house, either because he's contributing or she's contributing to the payment of the mortgage, or because there's some other support arrangement. For example, typically the person who stays in the house has the children with them, and that may be, the wife who doesn't have the same kind of career as the husband does, or may even be a housewife. So if the wife is paying the mortgage, let's say, from the money being given to her by spouse one, then what could happen is the spouse can withhold what he's giving to her, and that's one way of assuring that he uses perhaps that money and pays the mortgage directly. So that there are different ways that we could deal with it, so that the person who isn't living in the house is assured that his interest or her interest in the house is protected.
Now, Dan, what if in the parties' agreement, let's say the wife is the one who is going to be staying in the house until it's sold at a later date, and the wife says, I will make all mortgage payments, I will be solely responsible to pay the mortgage that was in both names with XYZ Bank, and I'll indemnify you and hold you harmless. Will that be enough to protect the spouse who is on the mortgage but not in the house?
Not a chance, because both the spouses on the mortgage are on the mortgage, and the bank is allowed what we call to find joint and several liability from the people who owe the money. So they could come after both of them together, or they could come after one or the other. So a simple, I'm going to hold you harmless from the bank coming after you is not nearly enough, because what will happen is the bank doesn't care what kind of agreement is between the parties. They're going to look to collect. Maybe down the road that spouse can collect from her spouse, but in the meantime the bank will have taken money from the spouse who has the money in there, with them, and will come after them.
Do you agree with that, Donna?
I do, and unfortunately the underwriters take the position that both parties knew about that debt. So just because the husband is supposed to pay it or the other spouse is supposed to pay it, it really doesn't matter in an underwriter's eyes. They feel that both are responsible. You can't just sign a paper and just say, okay, you're not responsible anymore. The bank does not look at it that way and will not be in favor of issuing another loan if they want to move forward, or even refinancing, because now you have late payments on there.
So the credit of the party who's not in the house can be damaged by the spouse in the house paying late. Is
Absolutely.
That so? Always. Okay, so then, Donna, would you say that a refinance would be a better option if the parties decide to defer the sale, and instead of maintaining the old mortgage, can a new mortgage happen?
Absolutely. But the new mortgage would have to be, the person that has the house that wants to stay in the house has to be qualified. And a lot of cases that I see, their qualification, as Dan said, sometimes they're a homemaker. That's only going to come from alimony and child support. And there are certain guidelines that they would have to start receiving it for a certain amount of time before they can do it. So this is a sticky situation here, because you don't want to keep both parties on there, because you could damage the other party's credit without them even knowing it. But it is kind of a rough ride, until we get a continuation of income showing.
Okay.
Another way that we can look to protect it is maybe we put aside some joint monies that could be utilized to pay the mortgage payment in case one of the spouses doesn't, or we put aside another asset of some sort, so that in an emergency, to protect the credit of the spouse who is not responsible for the payment of the mortgage, we can tap into those funds.
Dan, that's a great idea.
Okay, or maybe we put aside some money that was awarded to the spouse in the house in the divorce proceeding, but held in a separate account and reserved simply for mortgage payments. So this way there won't be a lack of funds to keep that mortgage current.
Absolutely.
We can also have the two spouses refinance together if doing so would give them a better rate and a lower payment to make it more affordable in the house. Does that sound like a good idea, Donna?
It does, but then you're still in the same situation. If one of them wants to be late on it, it could affect the other's credit.
Okay.
So, again, that's a great option, but they would both have to be willing to, really trust each other that they're going to keep this moving forward.
A few other things that we can do if we have both spouses still on the same mortgage for a period of time is we can insert in the agreement a penalty clause to say that if any mortgage payment by the spouse in the house is 30 or more days late, the house has to be put on the market. That would be a big incentive to keep the mortgage paid on time.
Yeah,
I would think so.
We also can arrange for both parties to have online access and complete access to the mortgage account so that they each can see what's going on, that the payments are made on time. Because, Donna, isn't it true the mortgage bills will be sent to the home? They won't be sent to both parties.
Right, correct.
Okay. When we have both spouses in the house or one spouse in the house for a while, we have to talk about some other things, such as who gets the deduction for mortgage interest and real estate taxes. Dan?
That's a great question. Typically, if the person in the house is receiving alimony as part of the agreement, the person who's paying the alimony is getting a deduction already for the support payments. So it makes sense that the spouse that remains in the house, who is actually paying the mortgage directly, claims the mortgage interest deduction and the real estate tax deduction. However, if there isn't such an alimony payment, they should consult with their accountant, but I've seen situations where there's even a split on individual returns for it, so that could be done. And I've also seen situations where if it benefits the supporting spouse, even if he isn't actually paying alimony and just child support, and because the wife isn't working and it's a significant tax break to the husband, then the husband would take that tax break. So it can work multiple ways, and it really is on a case-by-case basis that skilled attorneys, accountants, mortgage professionals have to look at this and make determinations.
So the bottom line is it's a joint deduction that in doing the agreement, we need to make a determination as to how that deduction is going to be taken, whether jointly or whether taken by one of the parties.
Correct.
Now, how about repairs? We have the house still owned by both parties. Only one is in the house and one is out of the house. What do we do about repairs, Dan?
Well, repairs could be anything. I mean, we could need to fix a simple appliance like a dishwasher. Maybe that's a $250 repair. All right, but also, the heating system could go, and that could be a $10,000 repair. So one idea is maybe set a cap. That the spouse that's in the house pays for any kind of repairs or maintenance up to, let's say, $1,000, just for argument's sake. And above that, then the parties have to split it. Remember, the spouse that's not in the house still has an investment in the house. And if the house is going to be improved, the theory is at the time that the house is sold, the parties are going to share in the value increase because of the improvement.
Okay. Another option, if we have a situation where one spouse wants to stay in the house and the other spouse wants to get his or her equity out, is to have the spouse in the house buying out the other one. When we have a buyout, we have often two components of the buyout. The spouse in the house has to pay the other one his or her fair share of equity in the house, and will also have to deal with the existing mortgages so that the spouse out of the house is no longer liable. Donna, do you see this much in your line of work?
I do. And I really think that couples that are going through divorce should opt for this so that they really make a complete break from each other. And also you don't hold the other spouse liable and accountable for payments that, say, you might miss. I tell them when they first come to me to let's get pre-approved to see exactly how much they can qualify for and if it's even feasible for them to try to buy out the other spouse. When they come to do the refinance, they don't take into account that there are going to be other expenses that are usually divided between the couple. Let's say sporting events for the kids, cable bills, internet bills, just things that they wouldn't even think about before. And when I do my calculation, I don't include that. I only include any of the debt that they have along with the income that they share. Well, not that they share, but the income that they have at that time. So I think that that's probably the best way for anybody to move forward. And also I like to give them that talking to. You know, why do you really want to stay in this house? Is it a house that has been in your family for generations? You know, you really don't know what's going to happen in the future. If you want to keep your kids in there, you know, we'll take a look at doing maybe a 5-year ARM, and that's an interest, that is actually an adjustable rate mortgage to keep the payment down for them. And it depends on their situation. How long do their kids want to remain in the school? You know, the kids might be getting out, they might be going to college, and they might want to downsize. So again, that's a case-by-case basis, but I think that is probably the best way to approach it, with just completely dividing it and giving the other spouse their equity, and both can move on at that point.
So, Donna, regardless of your good thoughts, if somebody still insists they want to buy out the other spouse, what they need to do is they do need to establish value, correct?
Correct.
To know how much they want to go to you and say, I think I need to borrow this amount.
That's
Is that right?
correct.
So when they go to establish value, they can do it in a couple ways. They can agree to have a joint appraiser hired, who is somebody who is licensed and who has training and will go out and look at the house on the outside and on the inside and look at comparable houses in the area and make a determination as to what they feel the house is worth. They can also get a few realtors to give what's called a market analysis, which usually doesn't cost anything, and then they may average them. They can also look at their tax bill, can't they, Dan, and look at the value there? Can they do that?
Yeah, they can, but that's a bad idea.
Why is that?
Because the tax bill is based on an assessment made by the town that may not be rooted in the type of advanced kind of appraisal that goes on when an appraisal is done or when a market analysis is done. Oftentimes, that assessment is based on square footage of a house as it compares to anywhere in the entire town. So there are different neighborhoods, different values in different neighborhoods in the town, and it's really a false reading of the value of the property.
Okay, now, what if the house is in poor repair? Does that make any difference in value?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, if for example, you're looking at that tax assessment, they don't take into account whether the house is in poor repair or not.
Right.
And oftentimes they don't even come near the house when they make these determinations. They might be going through, old records. And if the house is in poor repair and one of the spouses is now taking over the responsibility for the house, why should they be burdened with the total repair of the house when the other spouse is still going to enjoy the fruits of the increase in value when they finally sell the house down the road?
Correct.
All right. So one of the things that the buying spouse can do is get a home inspection done and find out whether there are any latent defects that they haven't seen, because not everything is obvious to the eye. Also, they should check with the town that they live in and see what requirements are necessary in order to get what's called a certificate of occupancy, which allows for the sale of the property. And there may be a ton of violations on top of bad repairs that exist. I have an example in a case of one of mine where one spouse is looking to buy out the other, and while they own the house, they built a second kitchen in the house without permits from the town. Uh-oh. So, I mean, the house is beautiful, but they have to tear down this kitchen and reinstate the way the house was before. That's a massive expense. So in this case, what we're doing is we're having the parties sharing the costs. And what's nice, the parties kind of get along. So the husband is handy. He was the one who general contracted for the kitchen to go in, even though he didn't take out permits. He's going to general contract for the kitchen to come out. So, you got to see what you have and the skills that each of the parties have and the abilities that each of the parties have to pay to make a determination what you're going to do.
Okay. Now, Donna, someone comes to you and they want to borrow money to buy out their spouse. You look at their credit score, right?
Yes.
What else do you look at?
I look at their income and their assets.
Okay.
And I look at the value of the home also. There are times when the couple will come to me and they have the CMAs and I still need
CMA is
a comparable market analysis. I still need an appraisal to be done through a bank, any bank that they're borrowing from.
Who does the comparable market analysis?
The realtor does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a CMA or a comparable market analysis from a realtor, and it's an appraisal from an appraiser.
Correct.
Okay. So that at least helps the parties get an idea of the value of the house, which may or may not be the same as the value of the bank's appraiser in the mortgage process, but
Correct.
at least they get an idea of it. They have to use the number they agree on to stipulate what the equity is in the house, and the equity is the difference between the outstanding loans and the value of the house.
Correct.
They usually split that 50-50, and then in addition to that amount, the spouse who's buying out the other has to take out a new loan to get rid of the old ones, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Is it a good idea, Donna, that someone coming to you, before they even do that, they order their credit report and see what's on there?
Yeah, that's the greatest thing that they can do for themselves, and that is to come forward first before they make any commitment to buy out, because I would get the client at the end of the divorce that would come to me and say, I have 9 months to get my spouse off, and they couldn't qualify on their own. So it's really a good idea to get me involved and to sit down and take a look at the entire picture before they sign any type of a property settlement agreement.
So, Donna, if Dan and I are working on a case, and we don't have a final agreement yet, but one of our clients is contemplating buying out the other, would you be willing to get involved, and do you get involved at that point in time?
Absolutely. That's the best time somebody can call me. When they call me after everything, it's very difficult to put it back together. So in the beginning of the divorce process is really the key time to get somebody like myself involved.
And you would also give advice and steps for the buying spouse to do things to repair his or her credit to be in better shape for the application
Yes.
for the new mortgage?
Yes, there are many times where I work with a client 6 to 9 months to try to get their credit cleaned up, and then they can move forward to purchase the house.
Okay. Well, basically, I think the bottom line that we're trying to say here, as divorce and real estate attorneys and as a mortgage banker, is in our divorce practice, if we work and if our clients work with attorneys who will work with a loan rep who's experienced in divorce lending like Donna is, we can all help the clients through this process for a smooth and successful transaction and to successfully comply with the terms of an agreement rather than have those terms be pie in the sky that they will never be able to attain due to unknown credit problems or unforeseen disabilities in getting a loan.
I think another key area that they need to look at also is to get a home inspection done. I do have many times when somebody would come and want to buy the other spouse out and they agree upon a price and then they have, maybe $18,000 worth of mold remediation that they have to do. So I think along with an appraisal, it's a really good idea to get a home inspection done so that they're not purchasing the money pit. I think that we all saw that movie and that turned out to be a nightmare.
Which movie was that?
Money Pit.
The Money Pit.
Oh yeah, that Shelley
Did you
Long
see that?
falling through wood in the house from the first floor to the
Exactly.
second floor.
Just
Yeah.
because you've lived there for 25 years, you don't really know what's going on. I mean, underneath the crawl space, you could have a bunch of mold growing in the attic, and you'll never know that. So I think a really good idea is to get a home inspection done before you even attempt to want to buy that house out. It might have so much damage to it that it's not worth it to you.
And I think one of the things that you've always done with cases that I've had is you've looked at the case individually, and you, for example, where the spouse who's buying out hasn't worked, you have to work with them over many months to create an income stream so
Right.
that they qualify for the mortgage down the road.
Yes.
And that's one of the real benefits to bringing in the mortgage lending specialist in the middle of the case as opposed to the end where we've already created the situation and we haven't had time to create that income stream for the spouse that's buying out.
Correct, yeah. And guidelines change they change daily, and it's going to be hard you as attorneys have to act as everything. You're acting as financial, a CPA. I mean, you wear a number of different hats when you're looking at a couple that are getting divorced. So I think just having the other professionals with you is just an asset to you, so that you can help them really maintain a good agreement, a good solid agreement, and then the couple walks away happy. Everybody gets what they want.
I agree. It doesn't do us much good to craft an agreement that one of the clients just can't comply with and no one was aware of it.
Yeah, that's why we bring in specialists, and when it comes to real estate, the mortgage lending specialist is paramount. We have to have the right person.
Oh, thank you. And I adore working with the attorneys.
I don't blame you.
Attorneys have reputations as being wonderful, wonderful people. So
They
I
are.
can totally understand.
Very special attorneys.
They totally are, especially the ones I work with.
That's
Dustin, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. So I know that our time is about up now, but let's say that there are people listening that they have questions still about dealing with a marital home during a divorce. What should they do? Should they reach out to one of you with their questions, schedule an appointment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure Dan and I would both be willing to answer questions for our listeners. We answer these types of questions for our clients all the time. And we, especially in our collaborative practice, when we are representing our clients in a divorce, it's not in a vacuum. We have other professionals involved, whether it's somebody like Donna actually, or a mortgage person. We have the skills that both Dan and I bring to the table as real estate and divorce attorneys. So we're happy to answer questions, and we also hope that this is food for thought for our existing and future clients, and questions are always welcome.
I think it's important that the attorneys kind of run the process. We know, the laws. We know we've had many cases in our history, and we will bring in the professionals that are needed to help our clients move forward with their lives.
Just as a side note for people listening, we haven't really mentioned it, but you're talking within the context of a collaborative divorce process, right,
Yes.
Dan? Right.
Dustin, I have been speaking as a mortgage banker within a litigated process as well.
Yeah, but in terms of bringing in the team approach and bringing in professionals, that's more in line with the collaborative process. In the litigation process, you may have divergent opinions. That's why it's in litigation. Whereas in the collaborative process, we try to bring the parties together to come up with a common understanding. Unfortunately, in the litigation process, oftentimes there's so much dispute between the parties that it may be that one of the parties has their own specialists and the other party has their
Right.
own specialists, and we come up with competing appraisals,
Right.
and competing mortgage information. So when we're talking about building a team, we're really talking about the collaborative process.
Yeah, Dustin, it's much, much easier working with a couple that's doing it through collaborative because I can look at both of their situations together. When I work with a litigation case, it's very difficult because I have to get one spouse to agree to give me certain things, and then I'm held up by the other spouse because they don't comply with any orders, and it creates a nightmare sometimes.
So in collaborative, I think the biggest difference, Dustin, is that when we reach an agreement, an important agreement such as this one, whether it's a buyout or a deferred sale of a marital home, we don't just do it to win the point that our client wants. We do it because we want the person who's going to have the obligation to succeed. So if Dan's client is buying out my client's interest, because of the mindset of collaborative divorce practitioners, I want Dan's client to succeed. I want to help, and my client will want to help Dan's client succeed. That's why we bring in Donna early on, so we can see what needs to be done, so we have really not just a success of the party, but a success of the process.
And it's
Right.
important to remember, Dustin, that in most divorce situations, there's third parties involved, and they're the children. And the collaborative process focuses in on the needs of the children as a primary important goal, to make sure that the children are kept safe and secure, and are unaffected by the divorce as much as possible. So when
Absolutely.
we're talking about the transfer of a house from the father to the mother, oftentimes what we're looking to do is keep the children in the house, at least until they've reached age where they're leaving for college or they're starting a new high school or something along the line, some event in their life where it will maybe be a smoother transition.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today about this topic. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
inviting
Dustin.
us.
We've been talking with Donna Ranieri, C. Catherine Janarone, and Daniel Green today about the spouse and the house, real estate and divorce. If you have questions about this topic or want to learn more, please visit NewJerseyDivorceTalkRadio.com, where you can find the show notes and more information about our guest. There'll be contact information there. If you have additional questions or want to schedule an appointment with one of our guests regarding these issues. Thank you for listening, and until next time, we'll see you at NewJerseyDivorceTalkRadio.com.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio is brought to you by the Collaborative Divorce Professionals Practice Group, independent interdisciplinary divorce professionals serving Monmouth, Middlesex, and Ocean counties. For more information, visit njcollaborativeprofessionals.com.
New Jersey Divorce Talk Radio, empowering families to divorce with dignity.